Guten gardening, everybody! Today's video is the first in a 3-video series where we talk about reducing the amount of plastic that we use in seed starting, which is something that's actually a pretty important step that I think more of us can take. You know, there have been plenty of studies into the impact of single-use plastics, and I think if we treat gardening supplies, specifically what we use for seedlings and seed starting, as single-use, then that's where we run into part of the problem, and it's certainly not something that's good for the environment. So in these 3 videos, I'm going to talk about different approaches that you can take to try to limit the amount of plastic that you're using. And it may seem a little bit odd because today I have a whole bunch of plastic stuff here, but I'll explain exactly why this is all here and how I think this actually helps to reduce the amount of plastic we're using. And one of the pieces here isn't plastic, but we did have somebody ask us this question in one of our comments of how we feel or what we think about using these egg cartons for seed starting. And I'm going to show you that. So our primary focus in today's video is going to be how we repurpose or reuse plastics so that we're not continuously going out there to get new ones. Now, first and foremost, I want to encourage anyone watching this video to go ahead and give seed starting a try. Because for most of us, when we buy from a greenhouse, we're getting containers that we take the plant out of, and we toss. But for those of you who are still going to be buying seedlings this season, I'm going to encourage you to save whatever container they come in, because even if they're a little bit flimsy, you can typically get more than one use out of them. This is a nice flimsy container, for example, that I use to up pot in, and I could be using this multiple seasons as long as I take care of it and don't leave it outside into the elements. Now, one way to reduce the amount of plastic you're using is to invest a little bit of money and buy higher quality plastic that is easier to reuse for multiple years. Something like this setup, which has its own humidity dome, is a little bit more expensive, although truthfully, once we factor in the number of years we're going to be able to use this, and this one in particular has the built-in lights. But something like this is a little bit higher quality. You can tell the difference, the firmness of the plastic. This is going to save us the use of plastic over time, because as long as, again, we take care of these, we are washing them out, keeping them clean and ready to go. I just actually emptied this one out as I up potted some of my seedlings. But as long as we keep it clean, we're going to have the ability to use this for multiple years, which means we're requiring less of that single-use plastic in our garden. So multiple uses of plastic can reduce the amount of plastic you're using overall, but also then repurposing some of your containers can have the same impact. Now, I know most of us are actually going to come into contact with containers like these. These are food tray containers. Something like this is it could be a yogurt container. In this case, this is a plastic container that soup comes in. We're going to come into contact with these, and so the question is, what do we do with them? And my thought is, if we can use these in our garden in a way that is going to be safe, and also a way that's going to cause us to not have to purchase other plastic supplies, then that's a benefit, and that's a reduction in plastic use. Now, one thing to know with any of these plastic supplies is if it came with food in it, it's likely going to be food safe. We typically reuse plastic number 2 or plastic number 5, and you can see the number on the bottom of these containers. Plastic number 2 is called PE, or polyethylene plastic, and plastic number 5 is called PP, or polypropylene plastic. Both of those are considered to be food safe. And there are other types of plastic considered to be food safe, but some of them I think you have to be a little bit more careful with. This dish, for example, which had sushi in it, is number 1 plastic. And the problem is you want to avoid heat on this kind of plastic to avoid leaching. This one's kind of cool because it has its own humidity dome built in, as do a lot of our containers here. The problem with this container for the use of starting seeds is it's only about a 1/2 inch deep. And one of the things you want to look for in your plastic containers, and I think I could probably start maybe some lettuce seeds in here, something like that, but we'd like to have a little bit more depth. We'd like to come as close to 2 inches as possible for our seed starting. So something like this hot lunch tray that we got at the store a couple of years ago is actually going to be a better fit. This one also has its own built-in humidity dome with some holes already in these. And so these, or something like this container. Now, with a yogurt container, you're going to have a white plastic typically, something that isn't as translucent. For something like this, where I have the clear plastic, I don't really love that as much for the roots. So what I would likely do is to wrap this maybe in some foil or something like that to keep the light out. Now, with any of these that you're repurposing, it's also going to be important to have holes in the bottom for drainage. and holes in the top, because even with this built-in humidity dome that the lid provides for us, we still want this to be able to breathe. The way I'd recommend putting holes in is to use a drill, a small drill bit. And the reason I say that is because, you know, plastic can be a little bit fragile. And if you just try to poke something through the bottom of it, in all likelihood, you're going to get a massive crack. And if you get a massive crack in the bottom, it's not really going to be as sturdy and serve the purpose. So a drill, and maybe even a block of wood so that you can drill into the block of wood and create some nice firm stability as you're drilling, is going to be just what you need to create holes for your repurposed seed starting containers. Now, hopefully you're noticing in each of these examples that I've shown you so far, we're still using plastic, but we're reusing plastic. Again, we're not purchasing new plastic for this purpose. Now, this one I think is actually really cool. My wife figured this out just the other day. This is a two-parter here. We've got a single-use coffee cup here for like a Keurig. This is number 5 plastic, okay? It's food safe. You know, when you load this into your coffee machine, it creates a hole in the bottom. That hole is created so the coffee can run through. So we've already got a hole poked into the bottom of this. And then we found that milk lids, especially this particular kind of milk jug lid, has the ability to fit directly underneath so that when you water, you've got a spot where you can go ahead and water, and it will catch the excess water that's running through this and actually keep it watered a little bit longer because it can absorb it right back up over time. And if you're patient enough, you could probably set 40 or 50 of these into a tray. And so what we would suggest is, instead of just throwing these out, and we did a video on not throwing these out a while back, but instead of just throwing these out, if you're somebody who uses this type of device, or you can get your hands on these single-use pods, go ahead and collect them over time, and you can use this to start your seeds in as well. Again, this one takes a little bit more patience, but it's a way to recycle what some of you are already using in your house. And on top of that, of course, the coffee grounds, spent coffee grounds, are a great organic matter to add to your garden, especially since they're pH neutral, or basically pH neutral. And so you're getting multiple benefits from the same potential single-use plastic. All right, I know I said reduce plastic, and I've talked nonstop about different plastic containers and repurposing, but this one is different. This is a cardboard egg carton, as I'm sure you can see. And this egg carton is really cool. It's got about an inch, a little over an inch of depth in each of the little spots where the egg could be. And what's nice about cardboard is it typically takes 2 to 4 weeks to decompose if left outside. But what we can do with this egg carton is to first poke holes in the bottom, little holes, and I can use a screwdriver for something like this because I can get little holes poked right in the center, so we have some drainage. Now, it's going to be important to not over water these because, again, it will get a little softer over time. And what's really cool about this is by the time we're ready to plant this in the ground, this will have softened up quite a bit, because we're talking 3 or 4 weeks at least likelihood before we get whatever we're starting in here outdoors. So that means it'll be closer to decomposing, and so what we can do is come through and cut this into 12 different little planters essentially, and place it directly in the ground. Now, if it's not far enough along to the point where you think that you're going to have it decomposing fast enough for the root growth, then you can go through and just remove the outer shell. It'll break apart very easily by that point. But you could also potentially just plant it in the ground as well. So there's lots of different seed starting methods here for reducing the amount of plastic by reusing the plastic, or in the case of our egg carton, getting rid of plastic altogether for your use. Now, the other 2 videos that are going to come up in our series in the very near future are going to focus completely away from using plastic at all. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about, so I hope you're excited for those, and I want you to stay tuned. I know it's a very busy seed starting season. We hope that these videos are giving you ideas, especially around seed starting. Here in Zone 5, Wisconsin, we're as busy as ever with our seedlings. As I look around, and you can't see my view necessarily, but I've got seedlings started everywhere in here, and I've got a whole bunch more to start here in April, so stay tuned for that as well. Hey, if you enjoyed today's video and found it informative and useful, don't forget to give us a like. Leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.